Okay, welcome to the latest of my series. So I used to be a PE teacher. There were loads of things I really liked about being a PE teacher, being outside. You can drape your jumper over your shoulders in the summer, wearing sunglasses, be able to come to work in shorts and a polo shirt, and still generally loads of nice things there. But as a PE teacher, there was a particular aspect I think is quite unique in teaching, and that is the phenomenon of the excuse note. And over time, over 20 years, I worked in secondary schools. I came to really enjoy excuse notes. And I think they fell into a number of different categories. So the first one you have pretty normal. Dear Mr. Carpenter, that's my surname. Please excuse Gemma from B today. She's had a cold last week and we feel it would be better if she sat the lesson out today. Of course, how we might interpret sitting out is interesting. And over time we did lots of things to try and still involve the children in the lesson, even though maybe they couldn't do the activity. There were ones that maybe were a bit less genuine, but were interesting. So we have, Dear Mr. Carpenter, please excuse Simon for you today. He had a slight temperature yesterday, And while we feel he's okay to be in school, we think it better he does not run around outside. And you know, Simon run around? I spent most of my time with him, trying to persuade him to get change and participate in any form. I can't recall anything close to maximal effort in that time, so I think there's much chance of him running around anyway, but that's beside the point. Often these letters were beautifully written, correct syntax, often presented in envelopes. There were ones from slightly overprotective parents. Something like this: Dear Mr. Carpenter, please excuse Matilda from PE. She had a cold last week. I think that being in a cold gym might aggravate her condition. It's a slight cold. This gym feels quite warm to me when I'm in there in my tracksuit and jumper. Then you used to get ones that were just, to be honest, a bit mad. Please excuse Dwayne from PE today. He hurt his ankle falling off his high heels at the weekend. Now I realise that the mention of high heels may set off particular thoughts for you. But bear in mind, this was a time when the kids were a lot of them were kind of like stacked shoes. So I assume she means he actually fell off his stacks. Although it might be something else. One of my favourites I got once went like this: Dear Mr. Carpenter, and bear in mind obviously this will be a school day, so it'll be Monday, Tuesday through to Friday. Dear Mr. Carpenter, please excuse Alan for P today. He was his sister's wedding in Ruislip at the weekend and is still under the weather. So I took under the weather to be code for hangover. And so given that the wedding probably would be on a Saturday, most likely, and the earliest I would have got the notice on Monday, that must have been quite a session, especially for a 15-year-old. But the thing I love about it was the detail, the fine detail. So the wedding was at Ruislip, because that gave it believability. You know, had it been at Lower Winchington or Stoke Poges or Peace Pottage, wouldn't have believed it. And then there were genuine ones from often middle class parents who maybe were trying just a bit too hard. I had this one: Dear Mr. Carpenter, please excuse Sophie from PE. She has a slight strain of her erector femoris. So very hard to dispute my knowledge. Especially given that the note came on headed notepaper stating that the parent was a physiotherapist. So very hard. Then there were some that were almost a bit gut wrenching. Please excuse Dwayne from PE today. He finds the cold weather affects his breathing in an adverse manner. Could he stay inside and get on with some academic work? And you're thinking, yeah, that's fine, but no, it's June, and we're in the sports hall on short tennis today, so I'm not sure that quite cuts it really. But with all this, of course, as you may be aware, there were times when the children would forge notes, and they'd either forge them for themselves, excuse me, or they would forge them for each other. And over a period of time, when I was head of department in the last school, I found this as sort of great irritation, really. And in the end, what I decided to do, because it's a difficult thing confronting children, is I had produced a standard letter. And this letter said, "Dear parents, there have been a number of instances of children forging letters recently. In order to try and reduce that, we're doing some random sampling." I mean, that was a lie, really, because what I would do, if there was one I was suspicious of, I would send the letter that had been handed in back with this letter, but on the basis that I'm not kind of risking anything and it's less confrontational. So the letter would say, "Please could you confirm that you wrote this letter?" And of course what I found with that was you had some quite spectacular strikes, although I guess a lot of the parents didn't really care. But I just found having a standard letter that I sent was a good way to do this. So I'll tell you this. This is a lad, Shane. I'll call him Shane Knight. Was in my PE group, and I actually knew Shane's mum quite well because I taught Shane's elder sister a few years before, and I'd got to know his mum a little bit. Well, as you do, obviously, with parents. And I knew that his mum was a history tutor at the university nearby, because over periods of time, so with his sister, we'd kind of got chatting about other things. Anyway, so one day Shane turns up to the PE lesson. Bearing in mind, of course, Shane presumably would have been aware that I knew his mum quite well. And he turns up, and he was the lad who didn't really like school particularly, and he certainly didn't like PE. He liked playing football, but he wasn't particularly interested in learning anything. Anyway, so he turns up to the PE lesson, and it's basically the corner of an exercise book or an A4 sheet, and he's got this note. So I take the note from him, and because I'm suspicious straight away, because I can't imagine his mum sending something like that. And the note says, "Dear Mr. Carpenter," not a very promising start, "please excuse Shane from PE today as he has very bad flu. Yours sincerely." And then it was signed Mrs. Knight, which I don't think she would have done. She would have signed herself. I think she was called Hazel or Heather or something. So I said to him, "So who wrote this? Did you remember like this?" "Oh yeah, you remember this." And I probably pressed it a bit further. So when did she write that? She said, just as we're on the way out of the house this morning." "All right, but your mum definitely wrote it." Yeah, okay. So at that point I thought, well, I won't do anything else. I'll just, post the letter off. I would have been dear Mrs. Knight, your son Shane presented this. We've had all these cases of forged notes. Could you just confirm that it's real? And this was one occasion where I absolutely struck gold. So this is what I got back from her a few days later. I'll just read it to you. "Dear Mr. Carpenter, many thanks to your letter of whatever the date was, inquiring if the excuse note that Shane had presented was a genuine one. I must say I was surprised to get the letter, as I had no memory of either the need for such a note or indeed writing it." Promising start. "I wondered what it was about the note that Shane presented to you that alerted you to the possibility I might not be the author. And perhaps this is something we can discuss at the next parents' evening." And then she says, "I've talked to Shane about the life cycle of the flu virus, and he now understands how important it is for him to be quiet and rest in order to make a full recovery. He's also now cognizant of the fact that he's very lucky that it's half term, and so I can keep him at home for most of the week and ensure he gets plenty of rest. It does mean, of course, he will miss the sleepover at Jonathan's house, the rugby tournament, and the barbecue, the bike ride with Finn and his dad, but he does understand there's a greater good here. We have also spoken about the process of contact between home and school in an attempt to clarify the lines of communication. My disappointment in this manifests itself in two principal ways. First, that I totally failed to recognise Shane's flu. To miss the symptoms is understandable. To miss some of the symptoms, is understandable. To have missed all of them is unforgivable. Second, and this is absolute killer, she says, my capacity to author a simple note must have been affected by Shane's illness. Shane has kindly agreed to work on this with me, and in the short term, all notes will be joint efforts. And then she finishes with, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. I am very grateful, and I believe that in time, Shane will be grateful too.